Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
Hello, BIM thinkers, and welcome to another crazy episode of BIMThoughts. I say it's crazy because it's probably going to be crazy, or not. And that's crazy saying that. I have the ever-popular and the all-knowing, all-seeing Dynamaniac, Dana DeFilippi.
I don't know about all-knowing, Bill.
I have the man himself, who everyone loves and no one hates, Carl Storms. And we have a special guest, Richard Schmitt. He's also with the Smith Group. And if you remember correctly, that's where Dana is from. So Dana dragged Richard in, dragged him along. Didn't drag him in, but dragged him into the virtual room, if you will, to join us on BIMThoughts. Hello, Richard.
I've been dragged. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Kicking and screaming.
You know, Richard is actually a really cool person, and I hang out with him outside of work. And
Really?
I drag him everywhere. Really. I started at Smith Group, and I dragged him there with me.
Does he go kicking and screaming, or just screaming? Or just kicking?
But sometimes both, but mostly just screaming.
Or does he walk into the room with the silly walk?
You just give in at a certain point, you know?
Okay.
I get louder and louder.
Richard, define yourself.
I'm an applications developer at Smith Group, so I build software for other people to use.
Really? Well, what about Richard?
Richard has been trapped in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 cats for 60 days or so.
Oh, Mr. Meowie and Mrs. Meowie?
Evie and Zorro. Zorro's a black cat with a white mustache. He is an incredible, handsome
He's
beast.
the anti-Zorro.
Yeah, the inverse.
He is, yeah, what would that be? He's divided, or he's multiplied by -1.
One over Zorro.
1 over Zorro. Wouldn't that be the other cat being 1 over Zorro sometimes?
Oh, she kicks his butt. That's for sure.
They're brother and sister.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, same litter. She's a gray cat, but he's got white and black tuxedo.
Cool. Application developer. Tell me about what kind of applications you develop.
A variety of stuff. So back-of-house stuff, like the system that populates Dana's Dynamo scripts. Make sure that that's on everyone's computer. To like interactive, like I made a 3D room viewer that we're just starting to use in production.
Oh, what'd you use to make that?
I started to use Autodesk Forge, and then it was cumbersome, so I just went and switched to a pure 3.js system. So I'm using 3, which is a 3D visualization library that's free. It's really amazing. Like 3,000 plus contributors to the open source project.
So what file format do you have to use for that?
Well, that's JavaScript. So I make a Windows application, but it's just a window holding a website, basically.
Well, what file format from Revit do we have to go from to get into there?
I export from Revit, so I take the room boundary lines and then reconstruct it from that with a height. So
I see.
Collection of points and then just rebuild it with their system.
So you're talking directly to Revit to get the data and then getting the data you need out of the Revit file and sending it to their system. That's
Correct.
Cool. So the user doesn't have to do a darn thing except enjoy.
Yeah, two-way connection too.
Oh,
you can
really?
They talk to each other as you make changes.
That's cool. We're gonna have to investigate that a little bit more, and maybe in a video version of this, so you can show it to us. What else do you do?
At work, it's just pretty much developing stuff all day. Last year at Built, presented on Revit Journal File processing, so taking that and like breaking it down into some sort of discernible
is that the
logic.
one where you showed like the graphs and all that.
Yeah, it tied into E3.
And I was the smart ass guy who asked why you didn't just do this in Power BI.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was a good class.
Thanks.
We use Power BI though as well. We use Power BI for his Dynamo logging.
Yes.
And tracking all that data.
We've been using Tableau because we have licenses for it.
I've heard Tableau is pretty fun.
Tableau is fun. It's different. Power BI has got some nice things in it that Tableau doesn't do. Like Power BI does dates really well, where Tableau struggles with dates, which is kind of odd, but it is what it is. But then Tableau does a lot of things that Power BI won't do very well. I find the database linking portion much easier in Tableau than I find it in Power BI.
Power BI is great for things that everybody's going to use, and it's really easy to share them. With that journal viewer project, it was more really about like, I want a reason to do some D3.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still the only person who uses that software.
What information are you getting from the journal?
Every event, basically, like user interactions. So every time someone clicks on something or runs a command, there isn't good fidelity for exactly what it was from Revit. It's more about like where on the screen they clicked, like what command was called. You can't get like, it'll say a wall was created, but you won't get the element ID or anything like that.
That's no fun.
You can inject stuff into the journal though. So if you are looking for something, you can put whatever piece of text you want in there if you have an add-in running.
Oh, I see.
So we kind of augment what is there with a little supplemental information by injecting stuff.
So you could have a little app that shoots the ID to the journal file. Yeah. Or you could just have the app just write that information to a different database if you really wanted to do that too.
That's true. If you don't want to parse the journal files, which isn't as much fun as it sounds.
Yeah, it is not as much fun as it sounds. I have tried to parse the journal files and I just couldn't find any value in it for me to spend the time to do it. Because every time I turned around, the information I wanted wasn't there. Like the element ID, for example, wasn't there. So yeah, I don't do that. Now what we do to get model health, I think you're doing it for model health or something? Is that what you're doing it for? Or?
We aren't quite sure what we're doing it for yet. We're doing it and we're turning on a faucet as far as like collecting it firm-wide sometime soon. But
you're not collecting it firm-wide yet?
No, it's still been prototyping it for a while just to make sure it doesn't, interrupt the way people work or break something. And like last thing you want to do is have some sort of collection device just screwing up Revit all the time.
That would be bad. But no matter how good it is, they'll always blame you. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's how it works.
That's a given.
So for our big project now that we're doing is Project Health. That's probably what everyone else is doing these days as well, or trying to automate. And we found Clarity does a great job for getting the data we need.
Yay, Clarity.
Yay, Clarity. And then we use the SQL database to get the data we need from it. So Clarity goes in and it grabs a bunch of the things that we want to learn about the model, like what's the square footage of the floor slabs, how many groups are in there, how many links are in the project, things like that. And we found that like the floor slab square footage was a good indication of how big the building is, as opposed to getting the rooms square footage. Because you normally don't duplicate floor slabs, but you do duplicate rooms from link to link. So you may have different rooms or spaces for the MEP model, or a consultant may have one that's put in. And so if you count all the rooms, your square footage gets a little bit bigger than you thought. But floor slabs, that seems to be a good way to get a good indication of how big the building is. And having an indication of how big the building is in square feet is a good indication of how the numbers look when you're starting to look at the matrix of the performance of the building or the model. Because if you have a really little model that's like a dog house or a cat house, and get your mind out of the gutter, but like Zorro's house. If that takes 15 minutes to load, yet the Sears Tower takes a half hour to load, you can't really compare those two models in load time because one is 3-4 square feet, and one is millions of square feet. That gives us a good indication of what to look at. Oh, this is a huge file, or this is a huge file in file size, but the square footage of the whole project is tiny. Why is this file so big? And then we can go and use that information we gathered to go in and dig deeper into that file and figure it out. They exploded 1,500 floor plans in 1,500 different views. That was a good idea. Now we have to clean that mess up. Of course, that's never happened, right?
Billions and billions of
Billions
lines.
and billions. Right. We don't like that kind of thing. So that's one of the big projects we're working on now. And it's working out. We've been doing it now for a couple years, and I think we got it now to the point where it's working. In fact, our Dynamo expert, Alexis, he is making a family that sits in the default view that gets the data from Clarity and populates a dashboard for him. So the Clarity server runs all these checks at night, and then the dashboard, it updates the dashboard, Clarity does. So now there's no impact on the user when they open the file because it's all done at night, which is really cool.
I mean, Dana helped develop a model health tool for Schmitt Group.
I did. That was actually one of the first things I did. And it was a Dynamo script that you would run as a user, and it would basically update your starting page with information about your model health, kind of rank you in a way.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing now with Clarity. It does the thing so the users don't have to run the script.
Yeah, so we actually, another application developer on our team at Schmitt Group took that idea and developed an application. I'm not exactly sure what he used. Richard, are you?
Well, it's a Revit add-in, so it's just scraping the model for the data that it wants, which is what the Clarity process is doing too. It's just, we should check out the Clarity one though, because I believe we use their service.
We use their service pretty dramatically.
Stuff not to code, then I would love to not to code.
Yeah, not to code is a good thing sometimes.
Yeah, that saves time.
Let Matt Mason and his team do it.
If Ideate or another application can do it, why should we? Why should we write the application?
Absolutely, let them figure it out. It's fun writing the application the first time, but it's a real pain to keep it up to date with the different Revit releases every year, or more than every year now. Now we're getting 2 releases a year with the .1 releases.
I need to call something, since this is a public forum, that in like 4 or 5 years, every Dynamo script is going to break because they did a breaking change in units this for 2021. It requires a completely different way to access units. So it'll be working and then suddenly just disappear because it's deprecated.
Oof.
But that'll take like 3 or 4.
So what did they change? Tell me more.
It's to tie into Forge somehow. It's like an accommodation they made for Forge. You go to a property that's like SG Forge units, and then it gives you a different unit type, and you have to use that instead.
Really? So you can't get to the old units in the API, or are they saying they're going to deprecate it?
You can now, but it's been superseded by this. So eventually they will just pull it. So that's why I'm saying 3-4 years from now.
Oh.
Revit 2025.
All right. Well, we're going to have to get some clarity on that. I think I know the person we need to bring in to make that happen. All right. So how do you deploy all of your Dynamo scripts out to the world?
Basically like a file copy system. So we have a shared network location that this pulls from, and we'll just, if it can find it, it will look at a little XML file for each piece. And if there's one on the server that is newer, it will do the action that one tells it to. So just checking the dates of those things and either deleting or adding stuff as it needs to.
Do you find that you have to do more than just file copies when you deploy your scripts? Do you have to do actual installs of things, or?
The whole ecosystem has to be set up. So there's other pieces to this than the file copy. Like we open up the Dynamo XML settings file and write in the correct package path. The thing with this approach is you're not overwriting anything. I'm just making sure that the one that we need them to use is there, because you can have multiple, right? We're trying to not disturb the customizability of like Grasshopper or Dynamo, where users can have whatever packages they want. We just want to make sure that they have the ones that we need them to.
Okay, because we're just starting to roll this out now because we're behind with the Dynamo stuff. Like we said in the last episode, every time we turn around and write a Dynamo script, IDA has already written an app for us, or someone else has already written an app for us. So like, okay, well, we don't need to do that now. We'll just buy this app and we'll be done. So now we have someone on staff. We have an app developer for Dynamo. So we're trying to find a good way to roll that stuff out. And what we're doing is just simply copying a replication of the C drive that's on the network, not the whole drive, but just the Dynamo stuff. So stuff that's in program data, for example, that refer to that Dynamo graph gets copied. So we run a robocopy on that when they every now and then when they start up, and we use a program called PDQ Deploy. Don't know if you're familiar with that. But what PDQ Deploy does is it allows you to run commands remotely on computers, in a nutshell. So I can remotely run the robocopy command, or I can remotely run a deployment to run a Revit installation. This is how we deploy our new versions of Revit. And it has a nice interface with the database and all that stuff, and an inventory module, so that we can then in turn find out who has what installed and which files are there, and so on and so forth. I'm wondering if that is really the right way to deploy Dynamo graphs. It's just simply copying the files necessary.
Well, for a lot of software, getting that kind of robust deployment information is important. Like almost all of our stuff goes out through SCCM through Windows, right, which we get our deployment metrics from. The reason we went with the custom solution was because of the frequency of change sometimes that needs to happen with these. People who are making Dynamo scripts or Grasshopper scripts tend to sometimes need to update it constantly because something broke. So it's giving people the ability to make those changes without having to bring in someone from our IT deployment department who have much harder tasks to do than make sure that there's the right Grasshopper script somewhere.
Yes. So what we did is we created a share on the network where it emulates. So it has a folder called C, a program, or a folder called program data, a folder called, whatever's next inside of that program data folder. And the robocopy script just simply copies whatever's is in that C folder to the C drive. So if they update any of their Dynamo scripts or need to update a plugin, they simply copy it to that right folder path on that network share, and then the script does its work to copy that stuff that's changed to the workstations. Is that essentially what you're doing with yours, or you're getting a little bit deeper in there with your?
Essentially, that's all we're doing, but there is also other tie-ins to kind of delicately manipulating files in place rather than replacing them.
What's the advantage of doing that over just replacing the file?
In the user data folders, there will be preference files. So if you contain information about like where to look for certain files, or like packages or libraries, all that kind of stuff. And so if you just wipe that with your own copy, it kind of takes away every other setting that you didn't mean to change that user had set up in their user profile.
That makes sense. So if they're a Dynamaniac per se, and they're doing their own Dynamo stuff, and they've added their own package, or they've changed one of the preferences in there to look at somewhere else, then doing the brute force method like I'm doing is going to compromise that.
Potentially, yeah. With packages and Dynamo, not so much, because you're probably copying them to that package folder rather than replacing the package folder. But the user profile would have, if there was another place that they were storing packages that they were also using, that would be gone. You lose, I think, your like frequently viewed scripts. So every time you push an update, suddenly no one has any history or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think we're doing anything in the users folder. We're doing everything in program data at this point. I don't know. I'm gonna have to.
Which changed places too, right? It went from Dynamo program data to Autodesk program data,
or something like that.
Yeah, 2019 was a Dynamo folder, and then 2020 they embedded Dynamo inside of Revit.
Right.
So
we haven't really rolled out 2020 yet. We're rolling out 2021. We're every other.
We're already talking about 2021.
Yeah, we're in every other. Well, actually, we skipped to. We used to be evens. Now with the 2021 came out quicker than we thought it was going to, even though it came out in the same amount of time. I'm sure you've got a question, Carl.
I do have a question. Richard, you were talking about the free geometry library you were working for.
3.js. So it's 3, like capital THREE. And then .js is just for the JavaScript library. But it's been around for a number of years now, and it's great. Like, it's super fast, like really performant. I don't know why somebody hasn't just built like a 3D or a 3D modeling software with it instead of whatever they're doing now.
So that's 3js.org? Yes,
I believe so. And they have tons of documentation and samples, and it's really easy to get started. Like incorporating 3 into that viewer was the easiest part of that entire process.
Cool. That wasn't really where I was going with the question. I just needed to bring it back around to the JS, the JavaScript. With working in that, so obviously you have some understanding of JavaScript. Have you done anything yet with the, I believe they call them plugins, for the new FormIt Pro that you have that has the ability to program add-ins very similar to like plugging in the API of Revit for a FormIt Pro add-in? Have you guys done anything with that?
No, I haven't touched FormIt, but I don't know actually what our usage of FormIt at the firm is. And if Revit is where, we have over 1,000 users, so that's where I focus a lot of time on that.
Rightfully so.
What are you using FormIt
for?
So
FormIt is kind of, a lot of people will say it's Autodesk's version of SketchUp. I don't know that I'd quite go down that road.
Oh, I remember when that came out.
Yeah, and so
I remember.
The idea is that they did put a lot of development into FormIt. It didn't really get the uptake that they wanted, and then they sort of silently just let it be. And there was lots of rumors out there that it was just going to disappear. And then about a year ago, it just all of a sudden got new life. It just reappeared. They pushed out a big update. They put direct Dynamo integration into it, and they gave the ability to do your own plugins, and they call them plugins instead of add-ins for some reason, using JavaScript. And even give you a few tutorials, some data stuff. And then just when they released the new version, or just ahead of Revit 2021, they released FormIt Pro 2021 with a bunch of new updates and the ability to have even more functionality of these plugins. And so the idea is that it gives you the ability to do a virtual programming environment. So you're going to be doing your conceptual design, your push, your pulls, what you might do in SketchUp. But because it's linked to Revit, you don't have to go through that idea of losing the functionality that you get when you go from SketchUp into Revit. And the other great thing about FormIt is the converter that comes with all of Revit's since, I'm going to say 2016, actually allows you to convert a SketchUp file. And I know we all go, boo, we should not have SketchUp in Revit. But there's a lot of people that use it, and there's a lot of people that have really deep connection to that 3D warehouse. I know that might change now that Trimble is making people pay for that 3D warehouse, but still people have a big data set. So you can use that FormIt connector and FormIt itself to convert a SketchUp object to something that you can actually dig into the deep layers and play with, if you will, inside of FormIt, and then bring it into Revit and give it a category. So it then can be furniture. So then you can swap it up for something else. So there's a lot of functionality there that tends to get lost in the weeds. And I honestly think that perhaps Autodesk didn't do themselves any favors by not making it something that you can purchase. So there is a free version, but to get all this functionality that I'm talking about, you have to be a AEC collection subscriber. So if you buy an individual piece of software, there's no way to get access to it. And I understand the reason they want everybody to be in the collections business, but that's not always the case. Steps off his soapbox. But that's why I just had wondered if you'd done anything with that and JavaScript and that. Maybe a fun weekend project.
Yeah, if you have FormIt stuff that's, you're using JavaScript or Dynamo within FormIt to create your model, does that parametric component of it translate into a Revit family in Revit? Do you just get like the thing that you had when you say click, like it bakes it, or do you still have that flexibility of whatever you were scripting with?
Both. So the idea is that you would keep the FormIt model, and currently the way that it works is very similar to the way that any conceptual mass works inside of Revit. So up until 2021, if you wanted a slanted wall inside of Revit, you would create a mass with a slanted face. You would put that mass inside of Revit. You would click on that and say, convert face from mass to wall, and then you have a wall. But if down the road the client wants the wall rotated a couple degrees or moved a few feet out, you would have to then take that same mass that you had already used, adjust the mass, and say, reassign to face of mask, and it hops into place. The same kind of functionality happens when you bring it in from FormIt, but you do have the ability to export it as an RFA or a family. And the big part is that you can then give that family a category. So furniture, planting, anything that's not hosted. So then we can swap it out. So if I create this lovely Herman Miller chair inside of FormIt, I can put it into Revit as a furniture category. And then in my regular everyday work of Revit, I can pick that chair and say, hey, this chair, instead of Herman Miller, I want to use the Flurgen chair from IKEA. And it swaps out like a normal, regular Revit family is, because it is. And it also has that category intelligence to it. I have a soft spot in my heart for FormIt, and not enough people use it. So when I get a chance to get in the soapbox, I do.
I use FormIt.
Well, I'm going to check it out now, that's for sure.
I use FormIt to convert STL files into an AutoCAD file so I can edit them.
What do you do that for?
Because I will go
Where do you
find...
get STLs?
Oh, from like Thingiverse?
Okay, so you do it for fun, like with your...
I do it for fun, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So yeah, I use it for that.
Sometimes BIM can be fun.
Yeah, no. Bill, please, this is a perfect time to mention your other YouTube channel.
You mean my Read the Factory Manual?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it related to that?
It is, yes, because there are parts out there for Tonka trucks and for Matchbox cars and for Hot Wheels that you can get the STL files and download them and print them out on your 3D printer. But if you know what you're doing, like everyone who listens to BIMThoughts, they know what they're doing. Of course. You take those STL files into FormIt, and then you can convert it to something that Revit or AutoCAD can understand. And, for example, I use AutoCAD because I'm weird because of the drawings I draw. They're not buildings, they're little things. It comes in as a solid. It doesn't come in as faces. So I have a solid that I can take and then mold and do other things that I want to do with it. Slice it, dice it, add things to it. Yeah, resize, do all that kind of stuff.
Well, we've almost hit an Aubin, but for maybe some of our BIMThoughts who aren't as informed,
yes.
Richard, do you have any suggestions for people who would like to learn to code, or some of the other applications that you've talked about, how maybe they could get up to speed and into some of those things, and how maybe they could start to develop some of their own applications?
Well, I mean, for a lot of people in the architecture and engineering world, Dynamo or Grasshopper or something like that is a great gateway drug. It's a lot easier to understand the logic of programming through visual programming sometimes. You can see that flow of data where it gets much more abstract when you're just writing text in a text formatter. The biggest thing is to just start small, and you see how things grow over time as you just build a little bit on something that you learned before. It's not an immediate thing. You can't just sit down and just become elite hacker or something. That person still spent like 20 years in their mom's basement learning to code.
With the cats, it's not like they were lonely.
So what's the cool programming language that people should learn to program if they're wanting to get into the typing part?
Python is probably the most easily accessible one. Like it reads very much like English compared to other programming languages. The syntax is a lot easier. You don't have to, leave a semicolon at the end of every line. You don't have to worry about a lot of that closure that happens in other programming languages. And it can be used for some web development stuff. Not so much for front end. If you're thinking about like, I want to code and make something graphic, JavaScript is really the only way to go. If you're doing stuff for Windows, it's got to be C# or something like that. But Python is great because it tooths into so many things. Like you can write a Python script for anything, and it's a very you start small. You like make these little scripts that automate a task for you, and then when you're ready, you can grow that into something else.
My go-to languages are Python. I agree with you on that. That's the one I'm starting to do the most cool stuff in now. I still do a lot of VBS because I just can't get my head wrapped around PowerShell yet. And I don't know why. I just can't. I can't. It seems like PowerShell is all about how can we write this code and make it one line as opposed to make it easy to read. It's like, hey, I can do that in 2 less lines than you. Look at this. I just added 14 pipes and it all works.
Well, it's meant to be a command line.
It is.
So one line is optimal,
Right. So I still use VBS for my scripting that I want something to happen on a computer on a scheduled task. I do that a lot, especially if I don't want to install anything. So I'll use VBS because it's always there. It's on the machines. I don't have to do anything special, and it does more.
You should check out C# then, because C# has a whole lot of power compared to VBS, but it's still that same window. Like
right.
All of the terminology is the same. It's just a different environment. Visual Basic is so close, but you do less honestly in C#. Yeah, you don't have to dim out all your variables or whatever.
One of these days. And the other one that I'm getting into, the last programming language that I'm getting into, is PHP.
Okay. What are you using that for?
I use PHP to, I write a lot of scripts to go get information from the file system. So, for example, I wanted to find out all of the file extensions and who they were written by. Because it dawned on me that if I want to know who the SketchUp experts are, well, then who's done the most SketchUp work? And how do I find that out? Oh, let's look on the file server and see who's done the most SketchUp files. And so I have a program that goes through the network and finds all of the files by extension, and then it will tell me who did that file extension. And then from there, I can start to create a skills matrix. So I can say, oh, I need an AutoCAD user. Oh, okay, who's done a lot of DWG files? Oh, Frank's done a lot of DWG files. Who's done a lot of SketchUp models? Oh, Steve's done a lot of SketchUp models, and so has Susie. Let's talk to Susie as well. And so what I do with that is I have instead of the program that gathers that data talk directly to the SQL database, I have it just do an HTTP GET, and then the web server that's on the same server as the database does the writing to the database. Then I don't have to put the passwords and all that stuff in the file that's going to be run by a different machine as well. So that's...
Yeah, luckily we have, aside from the couple of us who do development work at Smith Group for the BIM side of things, we actually have some back-of-house developers as well. So it's always nice to have somebody spin up a database and a REST API for you. It's a nice luxury.
And PHP does that for me. I can spin up a MySQL database or have it talk to the SQL database, the Microsoft SQL database, and just write one PHP page, and it talks to the database, and all I have to do is send it each value that I want. So I can have the workstations do that when they log in, or I can have a server do that in a batch process overnight. And it makes it very quick. I don't have to do a bunch of calls over the network to get the database to open and close. So it's a nice thing. So those are the languages I do. Python, Visual Basic, and PHP are my big three nowadays.
I've been wanting to for like a year and a half to get into Rust, which is a really intriguing language to me. Have you ever heard of Rust?
I have heard of Rust, but as far as I went is as far as I've done today with that the 3.js, which is just open up the web page and say, hey, that's cool. I need to learn that. Same with with Ruby on Rails.
Rust is very like memory safe. That just means it's like hard to corrupt its process of how it deals with memory while it's functioning. So you get less errors. Apparently, it takes a very long time to compile compared to other code, but that's part of the thing is that it's just sorting out every possible memory interaction. But it also compiles directly to WebAssembly, so it's like it could be an application on the web immediately as soon as
you do it.
You compile.
Yeah, but once you compile it, then you're done until you have to fix it.
Yeah.
Taking a long time to compile, well, I guess that would drive me nuts if I'm constantly compiling, run, test, compile, run, test, compile, run, test.
Yeah, it's almost as bad as having to open Revit to test if something works.
Yes, that would suck. Or to open Revit just to find out you loaded the wrong project. That's no fun either. All right. Well, we have geeked out enough. I wonder how many listeners stayed through this entire episode.
All 7.
All 7 of them. That's right. Richard, thank you very much for geeking out with me today.
Thanks for having me.
I had a good time, believe it or not.
We knew you would, Bill.
Dana, thank you very much for recommending and bringing on Richard.
I take him everywhere.
You take him everywhere, kicking and screaming. Carl, as always, thank you very much for joining us and being the rock.
Always my pleasure.
Because it's hard to weather through the storm sometimes. See what I did there? All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to BIMThoughts. We will talk to you again real soon.